My name is Dee Meyer, and I'm here with Paul Goldman, and I'd like to welcome you, Paul. We are visiting today and talking about oneness. So, Paul, would you share with us a poem? Would you mind doing that?
I'd be happy to. This is from Journey Into Oneness, the new book from O Books out of the United Kingdom, just released, and it's entitled In One Moment. All eyes shifted toward the patterned sky, seeking signs of the times to come. From the outset, none of this made sense. Then wasn't that the point of being at once awakened? Through the ancient eyes of soul memory, the unseen began to be recognized. As the familiar faded to black, a new reality emerged more striking than any ever experienced. You looked at me as differently as I looked at you, as if we were both looking at the same one. In one moment, each person's persona slipped away as one illusory manifestation after another simply vanished. The ancestral chants rose above the din that still persisted beyond the boundaries of our own sensation, until nothing was heard beneath this constant chanting of sacred vows. In one moment, we're now forever. In one moment.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
So, I'm interested in your process of connecting with the divine source energy, of finding your creative spark that helps you to get into the flow of writing. How do you do that?
Automatically anymore. This wasn't always the case, Dee. 3 years ago, I attended a spiritual awakening class. A friend of mine who was a rather intellectual writer friend of mine, the last person I'd expect to connect deeply to spirit, we ran into each other, and he said that he'd had his mind blown wide open, and he recommended this class. And I went to this class. There's a woman that channels a guy named Bill who was alive when she knew him, and then after he passed, she began to channel him. And in the spiritual awakening class, I was really ostensibly dealing with some grief issues. You ever done something where something entirely different happens than you expect?
Yes.
And this was one of those moments in these spiritual awakening classes. The poetry that I'd always written since I was a kid, and experienced droughts in times when I would wonder when the writing would come. It was as if the floodgates opened, the dam broke, and Rumi himself or some other ecstatic one was connected with me to the divine, and the poetry just flowed, and still does. I can sit down to do something usually now at the computer. Maybe I'm going to post something to Facebook, and I'm in the midst of writing a poem, or two, or three, or four.
Wow. So
And
I was going to say, if you could give a bit of advice to people new to the process, the creative process of writing, what kind of leading thought would you give them?
yes, it's amazing now. The poems originally arose from the cushion. They arose from the silence in deep meditation. In the beginning, I would need to get up and go immediately to transcribe them, if you will, as they downloaded, is what it seemed. And now, you see, I became a oneness blessing giver back in July of last year. And the poems in Journey Into Oneness really are the ones that have sharpened since that point. I had a previous book, Wild Joy Ruminations, and they were certainly ecstatic. But what I'm trying to say is that sitting in the silence, tapping into my center more frequently, as often as possible, quickens the writing process. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I do a form of energy work that is very much like oneness blessings. I studied at the Caritas Spiritus Center And I studied a Brazilian form of energy work, and it's just where you become a conduit of love and light. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what Diksha is. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that when you learn to do that, you learn to be generous and lift people up in blessing and in your vision of them, you
Mm.
shift. Your connection shifts. Things come quicker.
Yeah, you probably could see my with this rainbowism right now because you're giving me chills. I mean, yeah, I mean it's it's a matter of being tuned in most of the time,
Yeah.
right?
I think that is exactly what your poetry does for me too. It uplifts whoever reads it. It is a blessing. You are just so connected. It's really beautiful.
And I'm blessed to be able to give these words. That's why I would like to see Journey and Oneness into the hands of everybody. I mean, to be the conduit, and this is the type of stuff that literally transforms and changes lives. I mean, even the earlier poetry and Wild Joy, the stories that people would tell me. Um, there's also a CD that I did. The other book that I self-published was Wild Joy Ruminations, and then I did a CD right before that called Wild Joy Released: The Ecstatic Poetry of Paul Goldman, also the name of my Facebook page.
Right.
And I got a fan letter, which is kind of funny. A wonderful musician named, he'll probably hear this at some point, but Matt Venuti plays the hong. Do you know about the hong?
I don't know. I don't think so.
It's this amazing percussive instrument uh, from Switzerland, and there's a couple fairly enlightened people that make these. I guess there's some other people that produce them, but it's kind of like this flying saucer shaped instrument. Somebody told me like a Jamaican or Caribbean drum, but steel type drum.
Mm-hmm.
But it's made out of a metal called tongue. But he plays this amazing music on it, and so I gave him my CD, and he actually ended up on the trip back east. He gave it to his mother, and I got a fan letter from her telling me about how deeply the CD touched her.
Nice. Well,
So what I like is this poetry speaks to people across all boundaries and all ages.
it touches hearts and minds. And I'm so glad that you could join me today. It's been such a pleasure. You can find Paul Goldman at stonespiritlodge.com. That's STONESPIRITLODGE.com. So thank you so much for your time today, and I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Appreciate spreading the oneness.
So I'll look forward to talking with you soon. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Come on.